In this section, we'll look at yet another problem that seemed to suggest that the World War I had ended badly, and that is the matter of all the racial violence and racial tension that existed at the end of the war. During World War I, African Americans began a very famous mass migration known as the Great Migration. African Americans, predominantly before the war, were in the rural South. That's where they had been sharecroppers, and of course, before that was where slavery had existed. Well, the defense contracts were to factories in the industrial North and some of the big cities, even out in the Midwest and West. And so that's where the jobs were, and there was such a need for labor that those jobs could even be available for African Americans. And so, hoping for a better life, these African Americans packed up their belongings and they headed north to these industrial cities. This migration is going to continue in the 1920s and during the Depression, New Deal, and World War II, and it, of course, as I say, have a profound impact on American history. Moreover, African Americans served gallantly in the war, and this too raised their expectations. More than 400,000 African Americans served in the war effort, over half of them, 200,000, overseas. Despite the African Americans' raised expectations, the end of the war brought a lot of suffering for blacks. The African Americans were now seen as competition for limited jobs. The issue of African American rights was now a national issue. Before, it had been a largely Southern issue, and Northerners and Westerners had not given it much importance. And now that African Americans were competing for their jobs and were next door to them, they were not quite as open to reform. There was an awful lot of violence in 1919. In 1919, mobs lynched and killed 76 African Americans, which was the worst total in 15 years. The victims included 10 veterans, several of them still in their military uniform. In Omaha, a mob shot a black African American man more than 1,000 times in the middle of a busy intersection. In Chicago, whites at a Lake Michigan beach threw stones at a black youth swimming. When the boy drowned, word quickly spread among black neighborhoods. The result was 13 days of terror as mobs based on race fought and killing each other. There was a lot of innocents and killed. The black group has stabbed an Italian peddler, and the Italian just had nothing to do with the violence against the white boy. White gangs pulled African Americans from streetcars and whipped them. In the end, 15 whites and 23 blacks were dead, with over 500 injuries. Over 1,000 families, mostly black, were left homeless. The police, meanwhile, were brutal in suppression of the African Americans. Another racial riot was in Tulsa between May and June 1921. It's difficult to say the exact cause, but it apparently was started with a tussle between a black man and a white woman. And undoubtedly, it was exacerbated by the economic downturn, the recession of 1921-22. When all the smoke had cleared, it was difficult to say as well how many people had died. The estimates range from anywhere 55 to 300, but about 10,000 African Americans were left homeless as 35 city blocks were completely destroyed by the resulting fires. This concludes this section on how the racial riots and racial tension at the end of the war contributed to a sense that the war had ended badly.